Hey guys, so today I'm talking about lettering, and as you might imagine, I get requested this quite a lot and very rarely find the time to get around to it. So I'm grabbing the time now while I've got a bit on my hands. I find myself having a spare hour in the morning, so I thought I'd grab this quick. So we're going to kick off with looking at simple forms. What do I mean by simple forms? Well, very simply, straight letters. Straight letters to kick off with. Now, you know, I know a lot of you are probably a lot further on than this, but some of you are still starting out on this or need a refresher course. So I'm a straight letter person. I'm not really a letter artist generally, but all graffiti writers, like I've said before, must be able to do letters. You've got to be able to do letters. It is the foundation stone of what we do. Of sort of you know, post Philadelphia and New York graffiti. That's the art form, right? So we all do letters. So simple straight letters, things like a C, you know, for me, very straightforward. I'm going to try and do a really straightforward C now. I very rarely do this kind of thing. So a construction that is very, very basic, like so. There you go. Rough as you like, but you can see that that is a straight letter C. Very, very simple forms. Deal in simple forms, you can't go far wrong. Now, you can, once you master the simple form, you can begin to play with the simple form. There's lots of ways of doing simple form. That's just one. The dynamics of this simple form, what I've done there, like for instance, I've angled those the ends of this letter like that, just to break it down again, just so that everybody remembers this. I'm sure you do. You can break down a letter into a grid like this. Generally, letters are built of a 9-block grid. There we go. So if I wanted to do an R, it's something like that. See where I'm going with this? It's very straightforward, isn't it? It's a straightforward process. There we go. These are like standard. But by the way, you know, I'm just doing this very roughly so you can see it, because you know we can't get too excited about this kind of font unless you're a sign writer, in which case I'm sure you'll go mad for this kind of font. But you know, this is not what we want to do when we've moved on a little bit. But you've got to know the fundamentals before you can start messing around with them. You know, if you watch Grimm's channel, the artist blog, he breaks this stuff down very, very well, and talks about the sort of stuff you need to be aware of if you want to produce really good graffiti lettering with an understanding of weight and dynamic and composition, that kind of stuff. You've got to begin with these basics before you can start twisting the rules around and breaking them. So get practicing on the straight letters. Be able to knock them out very, very easily. So I think, you know, just like you know, I know it's very, very basic, but your basics are going to serve you well, because you're going to understand the very basic rules of structure, that kind of thing. Okay, so straight, simple forms, concentrate on straight letters. I know you're busting to get into wild forms and all that kind of stuff, but just make sure you know what the rules are to this kind of stuff before you move on. Okay. Weight and shape. So we've looked at our straight letters here. Let's look at something slightly different now. So what do I mean by weight and shape? Well, first of all, let's deal with weight. Let's take C. Now, my standard C that I do a lot, I do a couple of C's, and both of them are quite similar in weight. And what I mean is, so sometimes I do a sort of ovular C like this, and there you go, there's my classic sort of ovular C. put a little thing on the air so I can attach some doodads or whatever. That's, you know, that's by the by. But what I'm talking about is the weight is all up here. Can you see that? This is where the weight sits. There's very little weight down there. If you look at our grid here, all the weight is equally distributed throughout that letter. If this was gridded like this, essentially it's like this. The grid is completely different. I've stretched the top of the grid. So now the weight sits up the top of that letter. It's an aesthetic that I really like. I love top heavy letters. If I was to draw that grid out again, and this is how you create font. I kind of go, okay, so what matches that there like that? What if I was to do an A, say? Well, I'd steer clear of a capital A because I might be able to do something more exciting with a lowercase a with a font like this. So I squash all the bottom bit into down here. I give it a nice heavy top. There you go, just off the top of my head, I've got an A. I'm deliberately trying not to do any embellishments because I'm going to deal with them in a second. So there you go. It's a bit rough, but you can see what I mean. That is congruent with that. If I was to match them up and start doing what's called kerning, which is about the space between letters and spacing them out nicely, then I'd have all kinds of problems. But that's part of what we do in graph, obviously, to find flow, to get letters to flow together. But to get letters to flow is also kerning, but that's something else. That's a tiny bit more advanced, so forget that for a time being. So what if we were to switch that around and kind of go, all right, so we've got a bit of top heavy there. What about if we had a bit of bottom heavy? See that? So I'll stretch the grid the other way. Let's try a C like that. So now the C looks like this. There you go. Now it looks like that. Nice. So bottom heavy letters can also be pretty cool. There you go. So you got the start of a nice creation of a new font there. And bear in mind, we're still on straight letters. We haven't done anything other than straight letters so far. Good habit to get into. Work out weights. And you go through the whole alphabet like this, and I do. And that's why, also it's why writers do alphabets. Because not only do you evolve your own style, hopefully, but you get used to this kind of thing. And you get used to experimenting. You know, if you look at my alphabets, I'll flash an alphabet up so you can have a look at it. If you look at this alphabet, I play with the ideas of where the weight is on the letter. Sometimes it's very centered. Sometimes it's top heavy. Occasionally it's bottom heavy. Mostly it's top heavy because it's kind of what I do. But you can also play with the sizing of the lettering. You don't have to do a uniform size with your lettering. You can do all kinds of stuff. Mix them together, mash them together. You see, I always mash letters together. So that gives you some idea of that. So let's move on to the next thing. Let's talk about serifs. What are serifs? Well, very simple. Serifs are extra bits. Do a nice little cute C there. God, that's very rough. Hang on. When I do pencil work, I work up very quick and very rough. The reason I do that, by the way, is for compositional purposes. because I'm more interested. I'm not interested in detail early on. What I want to do is I'm getting an idea of flow and shape and weight and all that kind of stuff. I want to be able to rub it out very easily, you know, find the right lines. Some people say you should never do this. A lot of artists say you should never do this, never do multiple lines, always just work with one line and everything. It's never worked for me. I like to scratch around, do a lot of scratchy sketches, sketch work, you know, the sort of very scratchy and lots and lots of lines. I can find my way through it. There you go. There's a nice C. So, serifs. This is a serif. There you go. There's a serif on there. And that's a serif. I don't use them very much in that kind of way. But you can use serifs in lots and lots of different ways. Now, when you start doing slightly wilder letters, so look at the basis of a wilder letter, for instance. So a C that I used to do quite a lot in old days. Hang on, let's see if we can do this one. So I still use these every so often, by the way. I do still do these. When you really crunch your C up. Crunch it up. Give it a nice big flare on the top. There you go. So there's a C. On its own, you kind of think, yeah, all right. Graffiti C, recognisable. It's not very exciting, so we could start doing a bit of serif work on it. Add a bit of a serif there, for instance. Now I can curve that. That can be a straight line, straight in, a hard sort of. What degree is that? Don't know. Wasn't very good at maths. Let's call it 90 degrees. It's not quite, but you know. So you can do it like that, or you can curl a serif in, and you can do a mixture of both. I can hear people in my head kind of going, you can't do a mixture of both. You keep it congruent all times. Not true. You can bend all kinds of rules as long as it looks great. Now here, you can do the same thing. I can bring that angle straight in there, or I can curve it round. Whatever aesthetic does it for you, right? These are serifs. By the way, a letter without serifs we refer to as sans serif, or sans serif if you're French, because sans means without. So, you know, with serif or without serif. Again, just there. Ends of letters, you know, it's just inviting a serif, really, isn't it? There. I mean, you know, I probably wouldn't put this many serifs on if I was actually doing these letters, but for the purpose of this, there you go, nice big one down there. This ain't the prettiest letter I've ever done, but then educational purposes, all that. So you can see what I mean by serifs. And, you know, again, corners, blunted corners, your choice. I used to do a lot of sharp edges on my letters. Again, it's an aesthetic, whatever you prefer, as you're working out your style. Some writers mix and match all the time. They've got sharp bits, they've got blunter bits. You can play with the dynamics of your letters. So if I look at that and kind of think, do you know what, I can make that more dynamic. One of the ways I could make it more dynamic is if I look at the shape of that and the size of it. Again, weight and shape. What's the sort of grid on that? Yeah, okay, it's that kind of thing. What if I was to squeeze that down a little bit more? Really squeeze it, like get it into that kind of grid, for instance. If I was to squash that down, okay, let's have a go at that. This might be quite tricky. Hang on. Now, you can probably see that already that is looking a lot more dynamic, a lot more. And that is a very rough form that I'm doing there. So you can see what I mean by weight and shape. This stuff really matters. I mean, Photoshop has been a gift for writers because we can do this sort of stuff in Photoshop. We can take letters that we kind of think, actually, I could probably stretch that out a little bit more, and we can actually do it in Photoshop. But it's nice if you can do it traditionally as well. So that is essentially that form, pretty much. I haven't done much serif work on that, you know, I could do, obviously. I could just bang it on there. But you see how much more dynamic that is when I take the grid and I squash it down. A lot of weight just here, fair amount of weight just there, least amount of weight just there. Is this making sense? So there you go. This has been a very basic tutorial, but for all you beginners out there, you know, I know for intermediate, advanced, this is very old hat to you, but for beginners starting out, you know, I wish somebody had sat me down and explained this, because we had to sort of reinvent the wheel the long way around. And sign writers and font specialists, people who did calligraphy, they all learned this from the ground up and get very used to it. You know, for graffiti writers who we didn't have any of that, we just sort of, we spent years and years and years trying to work all this stuff out. And now it's all out there for you. So so what I would say is go and have a practice. Have a practice and see what you can put together. If you struggle, if you really struggle, do it by grid. Work to a grid, give yourself a grid, and you can change a grid all the time. Constantly change a grid. Kind of go, what about a letter that fits into that kind of grid? To give you an example. Okay, so I'm just jamming here because I'm just showing you stuff. So if I was to do something that fits into a grid like that. So you got, this is a mad one. So how do I make that work? Probably have to do a square one on the day, but what it does, it gives my brain, my artistic brain, that's not a great letter, but you can see where I'm going with this, right? It gives my brain parameters, gives it guidelines to kind of go, well, you know, because I freestyle everything, I don't really work to grids or anything, but if I need something like that to give me a new parameter, well, there it is. I can give myself a grid, give myself the challenge. What about a really low down grid there like that? That's an interesting bit of dynamic like that. What if I was to work like that? Put that in there. Obviously I'm doing C because, hey, you know, that's how I start my name, innit? And there you've got, okay, there you go. That's a very rough, bare bones of a letter that I could probably do something with. Probably look at it and go, yeah, I could do something with that. Yeah, that works. I can make that work. And then you can add all your bits, chuck your other letters around it, all that. Serif, sharp serif. Serif, sharp serif there on the end. So there you go. That's a bit of basic font work, and yeah, I'd encourage you to grab a pencil and get stuck in. Go and do some of your own stuff, and yeah, let me know how you get on. if this has been useful to you, then let me know in the comments. If you need something a bit more advanced, then we'll do that as well. I'll probably do something more advanced anyway, because I think I've covered this a couple of times before. Never quite in this depth so far. But I will do. I'll do a letter piece. I'll do a sketch of a letter piece at some point, so you can see how I join up letters and that kind of stuff. I don't do super wild. Super wild. Well, I did super wild back in the 90s. It was ridiculous, really. Sort of, you know, when we were all just trying to get wild and wilder on the style, and I did sort of absurdly wild stuff, but I don't really do super wild anymore, because what's the point, right? You want to be able to read it at least. So so I do what's kind of called semi-wild, really, now. If you want to look at great letter artists, I'll recommend a few. I'll show you a few now. Look at Totem. Really advanced. Totem 2. Really, really advanced. Lettersmith. You've got people like Izza. A bit of a calligraphy master. You got one of his painting partners, Nike. And great wild style writers that I'm talking about here. Really wild. If you know, dig out the letter forms in their pieces. Inventive, creative letters, incorporating all the stuff we've talked about: weight, shape, form, serif, all that kind of stuff. You've got writers who write straight letters, like Rex and Erg. Really great straight letters with fantastic dynamics in them. There's a lot to choose from, basically. There's a lot to choose from. So get yourself well versed in that, soak it all in, and yeah, practice with grids as well. Have a go, and you'll come on in leaps and bounds, I promise you. Anyway, drop me a comment, let me know if this was helpful, and also let me know what you want to see next, and I'll see if I can help you out.